Hi everyone, welcome to this week's crazy instalment of NLK Stories, or NLK's instalment of crazy stories. Either way, I'm back again with another round of crazy story. So we've done the one last week about the brush and the sweets.
Right.
Well, this week one isn't as graphic or gross, but it is impressive, okay? So we start in the book of 1 Kings 18. So 1 Kings, there's 2 books of Kings, and this is the first one. And we're starting with a prophet called Elijah. Now, Elijah's a pretty famous prophet. If you haven't heard about him before, I'm sure you will hear about him plenty more. He's a very, very famous prophet, and he is one of the few people that we know of in history who didn't die but instead just went to heaven, just like a chariot turned up. I mean, that's a crazy story in itself. Just this horse and chariot turned up and he got in it and off he went up to heaven. But anyway, Elijah, pretty impressive prophet. God used him for a lot of different stuff. Now, there was a king called Ahab. Here we go again with the crazy, badly behaved kings. Well, Ahab was one of those. He was a bad king. They had different gods that they worshipped. They had lots and lots of prophets who would scare the people and make them feel like they were going to get in trouble or worse. And all this crazy stuff would happen. Well, Elijah basically was like, this is wrong. You guys are in the wrong. And the king didn't like this. And he was like, no, our gods are better than your God. And Elijah was like, my God is the one true living God. And he's the only God who can actually do anything. All your gods are made out of stone and clay and maybe gold and silver. But my God is real. Well, they decided to have a god off.
Hey-o! Bow! Let's get ready to rumble!
The god of these people was called Baal. Okay, so they had other gods that they kind of worshipped, but he was the main one. He was the most important one. And the prophets, there was lots and lots of them. So Elijah had just one God, the one true living God who we worship. And these prophets, there was lots of them, and they were talking about Baal. So Elijah was like, let's have a god off. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to build 2 separate altars. One of those altars is yours, and one of the altars is mine. Now, an altar was like a big built-up thing that the Israelites used to make sacrifices and stuff on to God, or used to go to worship God, that sort of thing. And it could be made out of lots of different things. So they built up these 2 massive altars. And the first prophets, the Baal prophets, they were like, right, okay, let's get our bull. They had to sacrifice their bull. Sorry, some bulls were hurt in the making of this story. They had to sacrifice their bull, put it on the altar. Now we've got a dead bull on the altar and there's all sorts of stuff leaking out of it. And then what they had to do was pray to their God and call down from wherever this God was a mighty fire on the altar to burn up the sacrifice, because that's what you would do. You would burn up sacrifices. So these prophets were like, yeah, no problem, we can do that. So they did it, killed their bull, put the bull on the altar, and all these prophets start making lots of noise, dancing, shouting, asking their god Baal to come and set fire to the bull. Well, this started first thing in the morning, let's say 8 o'clock in the morning. At midday, 12 o'clock, nothing had happened. And they were starting to feel a bit desperate, so they started tearing their clothes and cutting their skin and doing things that were really not great to do. And they're screaming and they're shouting and they're like, come on, where are you? Where are you? And Elijah started to make fun of them. He was like, maybe you should shout louder. Maybe your God maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's eating something. Or maybe he's on the toilet. You should shout louder. And so they did. They started shouting, come on, Baal, come on, come on. And they kept going and going and going until evening. Until they were exhausted. And still nothing happened. The altar was dry. There was no fire. The bull was still on it. And they now looked ridiculous. Now it's Elijah's turn. So Elijah walks over to his altar and says, dig a moat around the altar. Like dig a big ditch around the altar. Okay, so that's what they did. He says, right, now get me 12 stones, put some wood on top and get me some water. Right, okay, so 12 stones, wood on top. Water. Now, I don't know about you, but water and fire don't usually mix. Fire can't exist where water is. Not very often anyway. And so Elijah is like, right, get me some wood. So Elijah's got his wood. Now I've only got one piece of wood. Now to show you, right, Elijah gets his wood and he tells them to pour water over his wood, like gallons and gallons and litres and litres and pondfuls of water over his wood. Now I'm going to show you, right, hopefully. When this wood is dry, it will light. Don't try this at home, folks.
Warning, fire is extremely dangerous if you are not a professional like Elena. Do not try this at home or you will receive many ouchies.
Let me try it again. Okay, anyway. It burns. So even though I couldn't get it to light because I'm only using a match, if it was on a fire, which we use this wood on our fire, and we burnt it, it sets on fire. It lights up, okay? So that's my bit of wood that's definitely burnt. This bit of wood, no burny, nothing on it that's burnt, okay? They poured water on them. Lots and lots and lots. So I've only used one jug, but they used so much water. They kept pouring and pouring, and it's dripping all over me and pouring, right? Now let me show you what happens to my soaked wood. You see? Will it even burn? Oh, don't get water in the matches. Oh, it just went out. Try one more time. Maybe I got it wrong. Ready? Just went out. That was it. So he soaked his water. Now what should really happen, he soaked his water. Of course he soaked his water. Water is soaking wet. He soaked all the wood on his altar. Completely soaked it. And it shouldn't light on fire now because it was completely soaked. Not like this one that will eventually, it burnt and it will eventually set on fire. This one is soaking wet. Dan's going to be really annoyed because we can't use it on our fire now. And this one didn't even light, nothing. Nada, not a thing. Okay? So Elijah built up his altar with stones and wood and soaked it through. Soaked it completely, nothing left of it. Well, not a dry patch left. And then he prayed a simple prayer to God. And you can read it in that part of the Bible. And before just as he'd finished, before the other people knew it, fire fell from heaven and lit the altar and consumed the bull that was on the altar. And Elijah was like, told you. My God is the one true living God. There's no one else like him. He is the only God. So, this week's story is a crazy one about fire. Remember, we don't play with fire. And it's actually about the people not believing in God, not believing that God was the one true living God. They thought that they could worship other gods. They thought they could live how they wanted. They thought they could treat their bodies badly and do things that they shouldn't do. And Elijah was there to tell them that no, that's not what we do. We look after the things God has given us, and we believe that he is the one true living God. So that's my big answer this week. God is the one true living God. Our God is the one true living God. He's the only one. There aren't lots and lots of different gods, and he is the only God that actually can make a difference. The difference between our God and gods made out of wood and stone is that our God wants a relationship with us. He cares for us. He loves us deeply. And he is all powerful, almighty, and he can even set wet wood on fire. Now, there's no need for God to do that now because, well, we don't need God to turn up and do that. But God does turn up and do the things that we need him to do. Provides for us in amazing ways. Loves us all the time. Sent his son Jesus to die for us so that we could live a life in relationship with him and loving him. Our God is so good. So that's my story this week. Our God is the one true living God. So if you want to read that story, it's in 1 Kings 18. It's about Elijah and the prophets of Baal. It's a crazy story. There's more craziness that goes on afterwards. Like Elijah, even though he's just shown everyone that our God is the one true living God, he gets scared because there's a woman who's like, I'm really annoyed that he showed up my prophet, and she sends people to try and kill Elijah, and instead of him going, but my God is the one true living God and I know he'll protect me, he runs away like a pansy and he goes and hides, and he's like, oh, I just want to die in a cave. And God's like, dude, haven't we just done amazing things and you're off here hiding in a cave? Anyway, if you want to know about it, go and read it. God delivers food to Elijah in the cave. It's pretty fantastic. So remember, our God is the one true living God. And stick around till next week. Well, don't just stay staring at the screen till next week. Come back next week for another installment of Crazy Bible Stories with NLK. See you later, everyone.